All right, let's talk Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta is one of the last teams to report to training camp, which means we get to look at some of these young guys yet another time and see where there's some potential steals emerging, see what value finds the Atlanta Falcons are going to be excited about, in some cases are already pumped about. And there's one guy in particular that's fallen completely under the radar, almost completely unheard of as a rookie. But I tell you what, folks, this guy looks like a massive steal. The Falcons got themselves a great one here. We'll get into all of that in just 1 second. But first, I am Nick. That is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the Atlanta Falcons are heading into training camp with a lot of positivity, a lot of momentum. Honestly, they're my favorite to win this division. They've got a lot of good pieces. Michael Penix Jr., of course, heading into year 2. They did have a few issues up front defensive line-wise. They made a lot of great moves to the draft and free agency. We've covered them ad nauseum this offseason. But there's another guy in the front seven, an undrafted free agent, massive steal emerging that I think you Falcons fans, you're going to want to know this guy's name. Let's get into this report real quick, courtesy of SI.com. Very quietly, Simeon Barrow Jr. was one of the most disruptive interior rushers in the 2025 class. Chris Trapasso wrote on CBS Sports, he had a 9.05 relative athletic score out of 10. So don't ask me how he went undrafted. Makes essentially no sense. And all Barrow did at Miami was collapse pockets. So Barrow was added as an undrafted free agent to the Atlanta Falcons roster. He will be competing for a roster spot and potentially playing time this upcoming training camp. And this report right here, courtesy of SI.com, it kind of came across my feed while we were preparing for the show. And, you know, when something like this flashes across, we get like 40 of these, right? Like, hey, some random reporter somewhere says, hey, this guy's a good athlete or has a good score. And you kind of look at it, what we do on this channel is just say, okay, let's dig into this guy. Is there anything to this? Is there any data? Well, I mean, is this guy actually good? Let's look at the film. That's kind of how we go through our process here. And Barrow was a guy, you know, I'd heard of him watching some Miami football last year. He was a transfer from Michigan State, but I really didn't know him too well. But folks, when you do a deep dive on this kid, my goodness gracious, he is a heck of a football player. Let's dive into some data real quick, just to give you guys just some high level stuff. It's really bonkers here. So we compared Barrow against what I'm going to call his peers in terms of defensive linemen in the 2025 class. We got Tyleik Williams, who was a first-round pick out of Ohio State. Tonka Hemingway, who we really like on this channel, courtesy of South Carolina. He was a fourth-round pick now with the Las Vegas Raiders. And then Yahya Black, a good quality, sort of underrated defender now with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And what we looked at here, courtesy of Pro Football Focus, was their PFF overall defensive grade, their run defense grade, and their pass rush grade. And you can see here, looking at these numbers, again, Williams on the left, then Hemingway, then Black, and then Simeon Barrow all the way on the far right. And you'll notice something, that the first rounder, the fourth rounder, and the fifth rounder all have a lower overall grade in blue than Simeon Barrow, who went undrafted. Okay, that's obviously a good sign for the Atlanta Falcons. How about run defense grade? Barrow had the second best run defense grade, only slightly behind Tyleik Williams, who is known for being a run defender. That's why he was drafted in the first round. And Yahya Black, who was an excellent run defender in college, is actually less than Barrow if you look at the grades here, run defense and pass rush grade. Once again, Barrow better than Williams, better than Yahya Black, and only slightly behind Tonka Hemingway, who, inverse of the run defenders, was known primarily as a pass rusher for South Carolina. So what we're seeing here from Simeon Barrow is that he is overall a really good football player. He's better than all three of these guys that got drafted. And on the individual attributes, he's very good as well. Only the specific, I'll say, targeted players, the pass rusher, for example, is the only guy, the dedicated pass rusher, Tonka Hemingway, is the only guy who's better at pass rushing than Barrow. Only the dedicated run stuffer, Tyleik Williams, is better at stopping the run than Barrow, right? That's obviously a really good sign. The Falcons got themselves a really good football player based on the analytics. But it's not just an analytics game. Let's look at the production right here. Let's go into our next chart here. And what we're going to look at here is, again, Barrow versus those same guys, Williams, Hemingway, and Black, working left to right here. And we're going to talk about pressures, and we're going to talk about stops. And Miles, I know you love the stop statistic. It's a great stat, courtesy, again, from the guys over at Pro Football Focus. Basically, a stop is a play by the defense that works in a loss for the offense. So let's say it's 1st and 10. They run up the middle and they get nothing. And you make the tackle. That's a stop, right? So you want to obviously maximize stops and maximize pressures, right? It's sort of the production element of pass rush grade and run defense grade. And you can see here, working left to right, we've got pressures in blue, stops in red, and S and Ps, those combined in gold, right? It's sort of an aggregation in terms of both attributes. And you can see, focusing on the gold first, that as a combination of pressures and stops, Barrow has more than Williams, first rounder, Hemingway, fourth rounder, and Yahya Black, a fifth rounder, significantly more than Yahya Black. He is a more complete player. Let's look at pressures right here. Again, Barrow led the pack even more than Tonka Hemingway, known for being a dedicated pass rusher, more pressures than him. And in terms of stops, he was better than Hemingway, a little bit worse than Tyleik Williams, and I would say about 6-7 fewer than Yaya Black, but still a very respectable 19 stops. So when you look at the aggregation of production in gold, that's the most important thing. Pressures and stops combined, Simeon Barrow is better than all three of these guys. And these three guys aren't slouches, right? We've covered Tyleik Williams. We think that's a great fit for Detroit. He's going to do great things. We're very high on Hemingway for the Las Vegas Raiders. Yaya Black is a situational guy, but I think he can develop into a stud for Pittsburgh. We've talked about him as well. So we're not talking about slouches here. These are legit prospects. But when you look at the data, folks, the Falcons got a guy who's better than them for no cost, essentially, undrafted free agent. You talk about a steal, you talk about a find, you talk about a guy that almost no one heard of until a few minutes ago. That's what you're talking about with Simeon Barrow Jr. This was a great job by the Falcons. I think he's going to not only make this roster, but be a contributor for Atlanta, both in the short, medium, and long term. All right, Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all this. But first, Falcons fans, in the comment section below, we're talking defensive tackles here. We're talking defensive linemen. So let me ask you this. Who is, in your opinion, the greatest defensive tackle in Atlanta Falcons history, right? A lot of interesting names you could go here. In fact, there's one former Atlanta Falcon now in Chicago that may be at the top of your list, but can only pick one. Who, in your opinion, is the greatest Falcons defensive tackle of all time? Put them in the comment section below. And while you're down there, make sure you go down in the description box and sign up for our weekly newsletter, courtesy of the Substack platform. 100% free, just extra content, extra articles, extra links. We even highlight the comment of the week. So if you have a great comment, you may find yourself in there. Again, link in the description box below. Sign up for our weekly newsletter. Would really appreciate that. But Mize, enough from me. Let's get over to you now. What are your thoughts on this latest report involving the Falcons?
Yeah, Nick, I think Simeon Barrow's a really interesting prospect. And I think in the vein of just looking at the data, looking at the production, what this guy does, I love stops. So a lot of great stops, a lot of great sacks. This is a guy at production. The Falcons need production in the pass rush department. We've gone over it and we talked about it a ton of times this year. They're 30th in the NFL when it came to pass rush grade. And on top of that, they're terrible at tackling as well. One of the bottom teams in the NFL, again, in the tackling department. But this guy, when you look at Simeon Barrow, those are things he brings to the table. You see the production, you saw the yellow line, stops and sacks combined together. Really, really good stuff for Barrow. A lot of pressures, a lot of stops, a lot of sacks, everything combined. He's doing a lot of great things on the field for Miami, who is a good program, and they play tough competition as well. This wasn't some group of five team that he was on. Love him. I think talented, but not like Iowa State out there that he's playing for. This is ACC football, not the top tier, but pretty dang good football that they're going against. So I love this for them. I think this could be a great one, but also talking about where they're bad at tackling as well. This guy's a pretty decent tackler as well, as 68.5 tackling grade last year, which by all means isn't a bad grade. It's kind of hard to get a super high tackling grade, but this guy doesn't miss too many tackles. So where the Falcons were deficient, Simeon Barrow excels. And as an undrafted free agent coming to the team, I think that's one of the ways that you can make the team the easiest. You got to be a freak, size-wise, got to be hyper-productive in one category or another, or really fit the mold, fit what this team is looking for. And that's what Simeon Barrow Jr. does for me. He fits the mold of what the Falcons really needed to improve this year, especially across the defensive line. They need to get better at getting sacks, getting production in the pass rush department, and they need to be better at sure tackling. Those two things fixed, I think this defense is in a lot better place. I think Simeon Barrow is a guy that can help fix that, really do a lot of great stuff. But overall, good pickup for the Falcons. Like I said, we're about to enter this training camp period, see how everyone shakes out. I'd keep my eyes on Simeon Barrow Jr. I think he's a very interesting product for the Falcons.
And yeah, just a few more numbers to end on. I agree with everything you said there 100%, but I love his positional versatility as well. Just last season for Miami, he had games where he started at left end, he had games where he started at nose tackle, and games where he started at traditional defensive tackle. So he's positionally versatile. How about transfers? We love transfers on this program, right? We talk about the fact that anyone who can pick up their entire life as a 20-year-old, as a 21-year-old, completely move to a new state, new coaching staff, new friends, new classmates, new living arrangements, completely different dynamic. Going from East Lansing, Michigan, down to Coral Gables, Florida, right? A little bit of a culture shock. You think just a little bit. He was able to do that and do that at a high level. To me, that's an indication he can handle moving to the Atlanta Falcons and show up at Flowery Branch ready to be a big time contributor. And finally, he's consistent with his experience at a high level. He had 4 straight seasons with more than 400 snaps total. A lot of experience there. And all 4 of his seasons, he graded out 71.5 overall or better. So we're not talking about a flash in the pan guy. We're talking about a guy who's consistent, a guy who has a high level of ability, but most importantly, the best ability is availability, and he plays a lot. He's a tough guy. Positional versatility. We talked about the data analytics production. I don't know how this guy would have drafted either, to circle back to the original report we highlighted from SI.com. But I tell you what, doesn't matter how you got drafted, how you got added to the National Football League. We look at this guy right here, Simeon Barrow. He is in the NFL. He is with the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Falcons have to be incredibly excited, and I think we're excited to see what Barrow does for this Atlanta squad throughout training camp.